to Tell podcast. I'm your homegirl, Ronnika. And we have a guest with us today. And we always love having guests. So I'm going to be talking to Carleton Brooks about a little bit about what's his why and what's the next project series that he's going to be having coming up. So I want Carleton to quickly introduce himself, and then we're going to talk about this project that is definitely near and dear to his heart and why he even wants to start this series and why now. Take it away, Carleton.
Thank you, Ronnika. I'm Carleton Brooks, and I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to do this collaboration about Stop the Silence, Stop the Violence, to address some of the impact that violence and gun violence has had on our community, and I'm excited to tell some of the stories of the survivors, of the victims, and how that has impacted them.
All right, so Carleton, I want to start with where did this urge come from? Because if you aren't from the city of Benton Harbor, you don't watch the news or anything like that. Why is this so important to talk about? This isn't just something that just happens once every 10 years. What is do you know the history of gun violence? And it's why the urge to talk about it now?
I can remember growing up. I think it was probably 94, 93, 94, where we had 11 murders in a 10-day span here. And gun violence seems to kind of, it seems to kind of be peaking now, where it's just so common to hear gun violence now. Mm-hmm. I live in the inner city, and so it is not uncommon to hear gun violence in broad daylight during the day, especially when it's warmer outside. Mm-hmm. For some reason, in our town, there are individuals who seem to believe when it's warm outside, instead of us enjoying the weather, let's kind of create some chaos, if that's the correct term. Seeing young men, young women who I've either coached or worked with in some capacity over the years, seeing them become, victims of gun violence, seeing individuals I've coached be involved in gun violence cases, who look like me, who walk the same hallways that I did in high school, who walk the same streets, that I did, and seeing how there seems to be a numbness, when it comes to gun violence in our community. I know it's a nationwide, problem, but to have a city so small, such a small population, and to have gun violence so prevalent in our community, I felt this urge to try to be the voice, one of the voices of the voiceless, to try to be an agent of change, to assist with what so many churches and organizations and other individuals are already doing. Mm-hmm. I felt led to take on this issue, to hopefully bring some resolve, some change.
So with calling it Stop the Silence, Stop the Violence, you definitely are trying to highlight those, because we know gun violence, some cases are solved, but a lot of them are not. So is that the reason why you decided to name it Stop the Silence, Stop the Violence?
Yes. If you go back and do some research, and I'm not going to call any names today, mm-hmm. Without having the permission, of families, family members, because we want to be respectful to them. But there are countless unsolved murders, in our city. And, there's a stigma sometimes in the Black community that if you cooperate, if you, tell investigators, what you saw, what you've heard, that you're labeled a snitch. And one of the things with this initiative that I hope comes out of this is as we, as you help us tell the stories of how family members have been impacted, by gun violence, it may encourage individuals to put guns down. It may encourage individuals who have witnessed crimes, who have information, that can lead to these cases being solved, that'll help them possibly come forward and choose an alternative to violence. I think one of the biggest things that we struggle with is conflict resolution. And so violence, and not just gun violence, sometimes violence is the only option people, choose sometimes.
So at the end of, once we wrap the series and we begin telling the stories of those surviving family members of the victims, what would be like the ideal outcome? Is it like having more people collaborating with the police force, or like it stops? I mean, in a perfect world, it'd be like we have no gun violence whatsoever in Ben Harbor, Michigan. But because it's alarming and it's frustrating, especially when you go on social media and you see the comments under the articles, oh, it's another shooting in Ben Harbor. I mean, we expect that. That's heartbreaking because it's like that there's so much potential and so many beautiful things coming out of the city. So what would be that ideal outcome after the survivors, and they're telling their story, but they actually also have to continue to live this life without that loved one? I feel like that was fully loaded, but yeah, okay.
One of the first things is for the survivors of the victims to understand that there are resources to assist them with dealing with grief. As you know, grief is tough, it's challenging, and it affects all of us. The other thing is hearing the stories of the family members, the understanding that these were somebody's children, right? Some of them have children that are left here, and they are motherless or fatherless. These are brothers, cousins, they are friends of individuals. And hoping that, I know it may not, end all gun violence, but it may prompt people to make different choices. And the last thing is to try to step outside of yourself for a minute and understand that what would you want somebody to do if it was your family member, if it was your son, if it was your daughter, if it was your brother, if it was your cousin, and they were an eyewitness, to the event happening, and they knew information that would lead to the arrest of individual or individuals. What would you want them to do with that information? Wouldn't you want justice for for your family member? And so to understand that it's not just about you, but those family members, those that are survivors of the victims, they deserve justice as well. And also law enforcement, the last thing. Our law enforcement needs to be more accountable here. In December, they did a press conference where they arrested individuals, and I think both Grand Rapids and Benton Harbor, and I think maybe even Kalamazoo. They had 200 law enforcement officials involved in that. But where are those same law enforcement officials when it comes to these cold cases? When it comes to family members having questions about where are we in the investigation? And I get it. I know they can't share everything. They can't. But to feel like nothing's being done, and to have family members who've had relatives that have been killed 15, 20 years ago, and yet the case remains unsolved. So hopefully even some of those cases can come to some resolution.
So I just noticed your wristband. So live in peace. Um, I was even just thinking about collaboration, so we're gonna sidebar that though. But um, Carlton, what would be if you could give in probably 30 seconds or less how you want Ben Harbor to look in the next 5 years?
I'd like to change the narrative from the outside. You and I know that this is not one of the worst places in the world, but when you consider, how they take numbers and talk about per capita, in regard to crime, and the picture is painted that this is one of the worst places on earth. Mm-hmm. Do I feel safe in the city? Yeah, I do. For the most part, I'm not fearful of walking down the street and, being shot. I'm not fearful of that. But in 5 years, I would hope that the narrative has changed, both locally and nationally, and people understand that there are a lot of gifted people here. There are a lot of talented people here. And this is a part of Southwest Michigan where it's deemed to be a great vacation spot if you, Google it, or even look in some other parts of the world where they talk about our beaches and whatnot. And that we remove that stigma of the snitch mentality, in the black community, where you're viewed as a snitch if you cooperate, if you hold people accountable, and understand that it's not snitching, it's just holding people accountable. Mm-hmm. Right? And just hoping that we can do that. So as Ben Harbor continues to change and transform, if you ride down our downtown area and different parts of the city, there is change happening, so just hopefully in the next 5 years, we've made more strides in making this a safer and better place.
And finally, what would be your PSA message almost for the young people that you work with, that you have worked with, almost like a cry for help to them? What would you want to say to them? Because as a person that formerly worked with young people, I seen it, I heard it, they know a lot, but what would you say to them? Because I feel like they're really, it's affecting them the most.
My message to them would be, don't make permanent decisions off temporary emotions. And I think that goes back to conflict resolution. Mm-hmm. I think sometimes when we hear the word conflict, it has a negative connotation.
Yeah.
And not understanding that not all conflict is bad. Two people can disagree, and and effective communication, right? I can disagree with you, but if I'm yelling, screaming, and shouting, that's not the way, I guess, and that's a little longer than what you asked for. But the PSA announcement will be, just don't make permanent decisions off temporary emotions.
All right. So, as we stated before, this is a collaboration with myself, the Final 48 Project, and Carleton with Stop the Silence, Stop the Violence. We really want to hear from those family members and friends who have been affected by gun violence. So, Carleton, thank you for hanging out with us today on the Please Do Tell podcast. And turn your notifications on, because these stories will be coming at you soon, and definitely hoping that it will invoke some change in the Ben Harbor community and hopefully the nation and the world. So again, this is your homegirl Ronnika with the Please Do Tell podcast, and we'll see you later.